Okay, thank you everyone. Nice to be here. Thanks a lot to Sean. Thanks to Jeff for calling me over here. Uh, nice to see everybody here. I am that classic before the lunch presenter, so I'm going to make sure that I keep it as interesting as possible so that you ignore all the hunger that you have. So my name is Zohair Mehkri. I'm part of Flex. I'm going to talk a little bit about Flex so that you understand a little bit of the context of where I'm coming from and why I'm going to be talking about some of the topics that I'm going to be sharing. Flex is one of the largest manufacturing companies in the world. In any first world country, it's very difficult for you to go a day without interacting with a product that doesn't come from a Flex facility. So we are a contract manufacturing company, electronic manufacturing service provider. We are in over 30 different countries. We have over 100 different facilities. We have 170,000 employees. We've been in business for over 50 years. So if you haven't heard of us, I'm really happy that I'm the first one that gets to tell you who we are. But a little bit about what we do is we manufacture products for as many different segments as you can probably imagine. So we have consumer devices, lifestyle devices, medical devices, automotive products, industrial products, capital equipment, solar, energy, datacom, telecom, cloud computing. Think about it, we have it. We do a lot with reverse and forward logistics. We do a lot with service and repair. We do a lot with manufacturing. We do a lot with assembly and disassembly and test. So the span of what we do is pretty wide. And that gives us a very special privilege because we get to see all the different products in the world in different industries and how they're built and how they're made and also how to make them better. What I do in Flex is I'm responsible for the digital twin organization, a word that you've already heard of today. And my team is responsible for the technologies for our factories across the entire world. So all products, all segments, all customers are customers of our team, and we get to use some of the advanced technologies that we find in the market to make these products better. Today, I'll talk only about XR. I won't talk about the other technologies that our group does. If you're interested in that, come to me afterwards. I'll tell you about all the different things that we do. But today, I'll talk a little bit about XR, and I'll talk about the challenges of XR. The panel that was before me, I feel like I should have just kind of jumped on while they were talking because they covered a lot of great content, and they talked a lot about great things that we've also noticed. So I'm going to talk a little bit about it in a different shade of light. So essentially, I'm going to try to get this to work. Let's see. Oh, wrong one. That makes more sense. Okay, how's that? All right, perfect. So the first thing I'll talk about is what the problem really is, especially in our company. I'm here to share experience from Flex. So what we're going to talk about is what we see, the humble opinion that we have, the things that we've done and the things that we've learned. So if you have other opinions, if you have experiences that you want to share, come up to me afterwards. We'll talk a little bit about it. But I'll talk about the problem that we have in Flex with XR. I'll talk about what we tried. I'll give you some examples. I won't go through all of them because there's a lot. We've done a lot. We've tried a lot. We've failed a lot. And we've learned an immense amount of information and data from doing what we've done. So I'll tell you a little bit about what that looks like and give you some peek into some of the things that we've done over the many years that we've been actually trying to use XR. I'll talk about the results, so what we found by using those different types of technologies, and also what some of our takeaways were. So some of it will be the things that we've learned, the things that we would like to share, that we would like to advise, but of course we want to hear from you as well. And then I'll talk a little bit about where we see this industry going and what we see will happen in the next, let's say, 3 to 5 years in this technology. So the first problem that we want to talk about, the major problem that we want to talk about with XR is a very simple one. So the problem with XR adoption is pretty simple. And I'll just tell you what it is. It's a very difficult answer, but the problem is this, and the answer is that. We're just not adopting it. That's the reality of it. The reality is that we're talking a lot about XR, and I've been listening to every word of every expert that I've had the pleasure to share the stage with, and everyone's saying things like, we're trying, we have some adoption, we have some use cases, we have experiments, we have labs, but we don't have enough people saying that we're using it every single day. We don't have enough people saying that we're using it so much that we're now going into the maintenance of our devices. We're now going into the device management. We're now going into upgrading our devices. It's a lot about we're trying things. We're playing around with them. We're making it fun. So for our team, for our company, it wasn't just a problem of adopting XR, it was a problem of mass adopting XR. We were able to adopt XR in different places, in different ways, in very small scale, but not ever take it to an enterprise-wide level of adoption. And there's many reasons for that. And the reasons that we found are the reasons that we really dived into to understand what's really causing that to happen. So the first thing we're going to talk about is what we tried. I won't go through every detail. Like I said, we have an entire portfolio. I kind of slimmed it down so that we could save some time. But I'll start from the top left there. We tried some warehouse, augmented reality. That was our first sort of, I would say, in production deployment. Everything else was kind of in a lab, or it was sort of in an office space. But that was our first one in the actual warehouse location where we gave an AR headset to our pickers, our frontline workers, and we said, use it and see what happens. Didn't really work that well. There were a lot of different issues. I'll talk a little bit about that. We tried 3D tours, virtual experiences, live video, virtual reality experiences. We still do some of that today. We still offer it to our customers. We still use it for customer presentations and so on, but not a mass adoption. We tried work instructions. We tried creating our own applications. We even tried having our own development teams. We even tried working with some third-party suppliers. We started doing work instructions on, I will say, common products for us, or easy to build products for us, as you can see a couple examples there in the picture. We tried to create XR as a platform. We tried to enable our people to make their own XR applications. So we wanted to focus on accessibility. We said, maybe we're the ones doing the development. What if we gave the development in the hands of the frontline workers and let them develop it? So we started to create design studios or creator applications or XR platforms so that our frontline workers, our knowledge workers, could work together and create their own applications. So we started creating these studios that you see there. We started to use different forms of XR, AR, VR, MR, whatever kind of R you want to think of. We started to pull all these different suppliers in and these different partners in. We started to get all these different types of equipment, this headset, go to the floor, go to the factory, go to the warehouse, whatever it was, and just hand them out and started to say, okay, now you can use them. And of course, like I said, not a mass adoption. We tried using tablets, cell phones, PCs, different types of devices that we could think of that people were maybe more familiar with using so that maybe they could adopt it easier. But we found very straightforward issues. Try to build something while holding a tablet in one hand. We found that you couldn't mount it properly because it was getting in their way, for example. So then we said, okay, let's get rid of the hardware tablet or the phone or whatever. Let's give them a headset. Let's give them XR work instructions on a headset. Well, we tried that as well. And in the beginning, someone said it's Minority Report, Iron Man, whatever you want to call it. It feels really cool. It looks really nice. And then they start to do it. And they say after a little bit of a while, I don't really think I like this too much. And they take it off and they put it to the side. We started to make our own applications. We started to look at, if you look at the bottom right there, those are applications that we developed internally. And we said, okay, well, let's do it ourselves. Let's see, maybe it's the product, right? Maybe it's the product is just not as relatable to a Flex employee as it would be. Maybe it's too off the shelf means it's too canned, right? Maybe it's not customized enough to our workforce. So we tried that. That obviously didn't work. And so we started to think of, well, what's the actual problem? Why are we not getting to our users? Why don't we have that mass adoption? So we had to look at the results of what that really meant. What did it mean by not having mass adoption? We had very low user rates. If we think about the applications that we developed, we would have users in single digits. We would have them in tens or dozens. If we got really lucky, we had 100 people, and that made us so happy. We're a company of 170,000 employees, and if 100 people used our application, we thought it was a success. But in reality, it was a very low penetration of what we really wanted. What we found was that users were not afraid to tell us that they didn't like the application. If you develop an application, if you spend a couple of years developing it and you go to the shop floor and you start working with the frontline worker and you start asking them how amazing the application is and you expect to hear a lot of great feedback and they tell you that they hate it, it really humbles you, especially when they look you right in the eye and they tell you, I hate what you just developed. And that makes you feel so good, but not really. So you kind of walk away just really doubting everything you've ever really done until that point. So then you start to think of yourself as, okay, we have to try something different, right? But then what happens is the numbers start to roll in. And you look at the investment, you look at the cost of investment, and you look at the usage, and the ROI starts to make a difference. If I mentioned this already, we're a $26 billion company. Our revenue is $26 billion. That's probably a big number, but that's revenue. We're a manufacturing company. A manufacturing company has very low margins. Our margins are single-digit margins. That's also a message to anyone that comes up after and they have like a product and they want to give us a really big quote. I just want to remind everybody that we're very low margins. So low-cost solutions or really, really generous discounts are very welcome. But we had loss of investment. We were investing a lot, time, resources, technology, equipment, whatever it is you want to think about it. But we were seeing that money basically be lost. So we said, okay, well, there's an issue here. There's a problem here. We have to go and figure out what's going on. So we started to kind of write down our lessons learned, our takeaways. And that's really what I want to share with you all today. The first thing is we're very lucky. I'm very lucky. My team is very lucky. My entire organization is very lucky. We have support from the highest levels of management that you can think of in our company. We're a very large company. We're a very large corporation. And if you think about XR as its strategic technology, the fact that our highest members of our management support us is a very big deal for us. However, even if you have a direction based on management, that doesn't mean that you can force adoption or use. Even if our executives came to us and said, I really want you to put this on every single floor in the entire world, if you go to every single floor in the entire world and you tell them that they have to wear it, it doesn't mean that they will. They might just wear it while you're standing and watching. They might just wear it so that they can kind of tick the box. They might just wear it so that the timer on the device clocks out and they kind of take it off and put it to the side. But unless you actually give them something that they want to use, it doesn't matter how much people are going to tell them to use it unless they actually want to. Traditional technology implementation techniques are very difficult to copy here. Now, you might be thinking of old technologies that we've tried to implement before and they worked, and they may work in some ways, but overall, generally speaking, if you try to do a standard POC, if you try to have standard metrics or criteria of success for an implementation, typically they don't translate directly into XR. And so what we realized is that when we were looking at, or when I should say we were looking at the KPIs for what was success, we were using traditional KPIs. So we had to really rethink what a KPI for XR adoption is and what it means. It's how it's measured. And that was a big exercise in itself. There's a very famous quote to me that was told to me by one of the people that I used to work with a lot that used to say, to manage a problem, you must measure the problem. And that's where we kind of changed it to say, to successfully implement, you must successfully understand. One of the panel speakers earlier said, if you don't really understand the problem statement, then you don't really know what you're trying to solve for. And that's exactly true in this case. There were some problems that we were being called for. Sometimes someone would call us and say, I have an issue. Maybe XR can solve this issue. And we would show up and we would just sort of throw XR at the problem. And we hoped it would stick. And it wouldn't. And we would walk away thinking, well, the problem really wasn't that good anyway, right? It wasn't really going to work anyway. But in reality is that the problem didn't really require an XR solution. It might require something else. We just didn't really take the time to understand the problem. We didn't put in the effort to really dive deep into the problem and understand what was causing that to be a problem in the first place. So the fact that I'm here talking about XR also means that sometimes we might have problems where XR is not a good solution, but we don't take the time to understand what that problem really is. And so we must first successfully understand what that issue is before we can just start to prescribe something to it. The analogy that I use especially is if you go to a doctor and you say, "Hi, my name is Zohair," and the doctor says, "Nice to meet you, Zohair. Here's a prescription." Without really knowing what I'm there for, then I'm really not going to get the right medicine that I need. And so it's the same thing here, to successfully understand what we're trying to do. A lot of us love our sponsors. We love it. We love that window of time that we get to present to our executives and say, "Look at this awesome device that we just purchased," or "Look at this great application that we just spent the last 8 months developing, and look how amazing it is, and look how beautiful it looks, and look how easy it is to use." And our sponsors give us high fives. They say, "Here's more funding. Have a great time. Have fun. Whatever it is that you need, just let us know. Come back whenever you want." And you take it to the floor, and then nobody wants to use it because we spent the entire time focusing on what our sponsors wanted more than what our users really needed. And so we went to the shop floor and we started to talk about these applications, and the users were saying, "Well, that's great, but I don't really like how it looks. It's really annoying. It's ugly. I can't figure anything out on the screen. I don't even know what you want me to do with this thing. And why are you still here?" We would say, "Okay, well, thank you for your time. We'll come back next week." And so we would focus a lot on the sponsors, and we had to focus on the users. The fact that we have the first bullet, which is we have executive support, doesn't mean that it translates down. So we have to sort of meet in the middle, where the executives give us a direction and sponsorship, the users give us their feedback and their desire, and we sort of have to merge those two together. You might hear top floor to shop floor very often, and we use that a lot when we talk about XR development. So some of the takeaways that we had was that we really had to design with human factors in mind. We had to think about the user. We would just go to the floor, we would just sit there and watch a frontline worker or an operator, just watch them for half a shift, for 4.5 hours or 4 hours, wherever the shift is. Just sit there and watch them and see how their hands move, how their eyes move, how their heads move. We watch how they walk, how they stand, how they sit, how they lift, how they transport, how they look at different types of information, how they consume information, how they translate or how they process data that is presented to them, and why that's important for them to understand. We have to design for UI UX in mind. Those of you here who are UI UX experts will probably know that better than me. But we have to think about, how does the application really look? How does the application actually interact with the person? And what does it tell them? What does it give them in terms of information that they need for their job? We have to think about psychology of the person. And this is really where the person starts to become a more important variable in your entire problem than we usually give credit for. But the psychology of every worker that we have across the company is extremely important, because it's not just the fact that they're a frontline worker, it's the fact that they're a worker in one of our 30+ countries, 100+ factories around the world, with their own country, their own culture, their own understanding, their own knowledge level, their own language, their own way of working, their own product, their own customer, their own site, their own management, and the list just keeps going on and on. It is a collective organization, but it has individualistic psychology. And that's where standardization becomes extremely important, but it also fails very easily. So if you think about how, when you standardize, how do you actually not standardize, right? So what we refer to as all of that is product psychology. That's how we really think about product psychology. And what we've termed as product psychology is basically just the accumulation of what that is. So if I talk a little bit about it, kind of going through a little bit of it, we've combined different things: human factor psychology, cognitive psychology, UI, UX, social interaction methods, and we basically just termed it product psychology. We're not psychologists, we're technologists, we're engineers, but we start to have fun and we start to think of different things, and that's where product psychology comes from. So look at 3 different areas of study: the learning, introduction, learning, and the usage, which someone talked about earlier today. And I'll talk a little bit about that. Introduction is how we actually introduce a technology. We started to look at social interaction, different forms of how people learn, how they talk, how they want to collaborate with each other, how they want to accommodate each other, and what that means. If you look at social interactive forms, there's exchanges, there's cooperation, there's accommodation, there's competitiveness, there's conflict. What we look at is, how do you bring collaboration and accommodation together? If you go to a floor and you tell a frontline worker, here's a headset, wear it, That's very different than going to the floor without anything and saying, "Hi, my name's Zohair. What are some of your problems?" And they'll just start talking to you. And then you go back to the lab, and then you try to figure out that the problems that that person told you, how you can solve it, how you can use the technology tools that you have in your lab to develop and give that to them. Instead of going there and saying, "I know what problem you have, just put this on and it'll solve everything." Rather than saying, "So tell me about your day job. Tell me what you like and what you don't like. What are some of the things that give you issues throughout your day?" Learning is especially important because when we do understand that they're going to work with us, we have to have them be able to learn what we're trying to give them. That's a very common example that you'll see on the screen here. You'll see a bunch of circles. Some of you might see circles. Some of you might actually see the circles making shapes. That's just because you're used to seeing things closer together. You associate them together. It's called law of proximity. You might see 3 rows of circles on the right. They're actually just circles, but you classify them as circles. When we design an application, we start to think of all humans perceive different things differently, but they also perceive them similarly in some cases, such as visual. So we start to say, if we develop an application, we have to make sure that we follow these laws of UI UX so that the person starts to understand that. The UI UX experts in this room, I can already see you all smiling, saying, this is a very elementary topic. The last thing I'll say is usage. So essentially, when we try to use the application, when our frontline workers start to use the application, we start to see that they are more familiar with common UI UX principles. Today, UI UX in your cell phone, your tablet, your computer are designed very in standard ways for your user interaction to happen. What we do is we try to copy some of that into our devices so that they are more understandable. So where do we see this going? Essentially, where is the market that we see talking about Flex, right? What we see is that as more and more applications start to be developed for headsets, there's a balance that has to happen. Today, if you were to go to a frontline worker and you give them a headset and you say nothing, just give them a headset and you say nothing. Here it is. Have fun. Typically, watching them trying to turn it on or try to figure out how to wear it or how not to have it fall, sometimes it's comical because they just don't really know what you've given them. They don't know how it turns on or what it does. But if you give someone a phone or you give someone a tablet, their hand will automatically go to one of the edges to look for the power button, which is really interesting to watch because they just know it's there somewhere. They just have to find it and click it. So if we can take those types of things and put it into headsets and try to balance the old versus the new and how you kind of cross-pollinate those two things together, that's where that balance comes from. And that's what I think is the power that is left to unleash in XR, which is taking some of the things that we've learned traditionally and the things that we're trying to introduce and kind of sort of combine them and take the best of both worlds. So the outlook for us is pretty simple. We see spatial computing. We see things where you're in a shop floor and things around you are doing the computing. You don't have to be wearing something. You can be, and we'll talk about that, but there's spatial computing. There's things that are happening around you. There are things that are computing, things that are presenting or displaying around you. We see advanced headsets. We see, everyone's talking about that. I won't go too much into that detail, but smaller, faster, better, longer battery life. You've heard that whole list already. And last but not least, we do see mobile devices being pretty powerfully used. In our shop floor, in our factories, in our machine shops, in our warehouses, doesn't matter where it is, workers still like to use their devices. They still like to take out their phone out of their pocket and do something with it. And so if we can make XR accessible in that form as well, that might unlock a new market. So that being said, I just want to say thank you. The last message that I have for everybody is that was our opinion. That's what we've seen. That's what we know. So if you have any opinions, if you have something to share, come and find me. I am here. I'm willing to talk to you more about what we do. I can talk for hours. I could probably bore every one of you for hours. And I can talk about it, or I can listen to you if you have any advice, if you've learned something, if you want to share something, come and contact me if you have a solution or if you have something that you want to talk about. But it was a pleasure being here, and thank you very much for the opportunity.